Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Medicine Weavers podcast. My name is Cervix, and this is episode 2 and my talk with Lora Groves. In this conversation, we talk about Lora's journey with her cervix from getting a pap smear that resulted in abnormal cells through to, in the end, a hysterectomy. And all the things that happened in the middle, including having her period, her menstrual blood being stuck inside her uterus, not coming out, and needing procedures, multiple procedures to release that flow of tissue and blood. So before I press play on this conversation, I just want to talk for a minute about the cervix. When I imagine the cervix, I actually imagine this beautiful gatekeeper. This gatekeeper to this sacred portal of our womb where we generate life and creativity, and where, in our womb, it's like there's this door to the spirit world where spirit can enter and become life and grow in our womb. And the cervix gets to hold that space. It's the holder of our sacred womb. Now, the cervix itself is actually considered the lower portion of our uterus, and it changes over the course of the month depending on where we are in our cycles. So at some points, if you were to reach up inside your vaginal canal, you could feel your cervix a little more pointy, like the tip of your nose, and at other times soft, like gently puckered lips, right? It is a sphincter, right? We have several sphincters in our body, although I think we have one idea when we say that word, but there are several, gatekeepers, especially along our digestive tract, where things need to be held in place until they're allowed to be let through. And the same goes for our cervix, which not only secretes fluids itself to create a more habitable or less habitable space for sperm to flow up and through into the uterus, but also holding in that baby, holding in growing life and keeping that place protected, that space protected. So just tapping in as well to some ideas around the cervix when it comes to the perspective of German New Medicine and other medical intuitive ideas. So the cervix is thought to hold territorial loss. It is the energy when it's reacting in this way, particularly when it's reacting in a way closer to cancer, for instance, right? It is growing cells, it's developing, it's mutating. It is a reaction, according to German New Medicine, of a territorial loss. So what does that mean? If you think about your territory, you can think of your area that you live, right? Your home, your community. It can also be your body. So it can be all of these things. It can be your work. It can be your space, anything you consider your space. And so any kind of a conflict with that, so that could be a sexual conflict. It could be cases of abuse or even sexual rejection. It can also be in your home, where maybe someone has come into your home, has moved into your home, and it really makes your home feel unsafe to you. And it is a conflict of your home space, or you had to even possibly move homes and not wanted to, and there is this sense of territorial loss. Beyond that, it can even be jobs, right? Or your office, the place in which you work, your community. So it's interesting to think of these things if you've experienced some cervical issues, maybe cervical cancer, right? HPV, or any other kind of cervical issues. It may be helpful to reflect on any territorial loss that may have been happening around that time. So on that note, I want to jump into this conversation and share with you this incredible, wild story from my friend Lora. Hi, Lora. Welcome to my new podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited to have you. And we haven't even really talked about what you're going to talk about, which is kind of hilarious. But I know you've got a whole, how do I say your past? A whole thick, goopy past.
It is.
So
That's about it. Yeah.
yeah.
I will
So
say this too. I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about when I came on either. I just, as soon as you put out the call, I was like, this is what I've been waiting for, to share this story. But also, it's not about healing in a very, in the way that I thought it was going to be about.
yeah.
Anyway, we could talk about it more. But I
Yeah.
too was kind of like, oh, what are we doing here? And then I remembered, there's more to healing than just the physical piece of it. But anyway, go
Yeah.
ahead.
And there's also more to healing than that final completion where everything is now resolved and
Mhm.
everything's 100% perfect. Like I think we have to get rid of that like hero journey idea and
Yeah.
say like, hey, healing is also like sitting in the muck and seeing it and slowly working through it and doing what you can to get one step better, or to just come to a place of like acceptance and appreciation for the shitstorm you're in, kind of thing. So
Mhm.
healing can look different for every person.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So where does your story start, or this particular story you want to tell?
Well, I think like it started when I was a kid. There was a lot of uh it was always very, very hard for me to speak my mind and to ask for what was mine. And also, over time, I've realized that the biggest problem was just not realizing that I belonged to myself. And so I would always feel responsible for everybody else's feelings around me. And that was really like led me into a lot of very unhealthy relationships. So one of them was particularly unhealthy. I received when it was about a year long of like persistent trauma that I also had to hide. It was very shameful. And during that time, a lot just got like stuffed. I was just a kid and I'm thinking like, oh, this is normal. It sucks and I wish it was over. And then when it was over, I was like, well, thank God that's done and I don't have to worry about that ever again, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that kind of compounded the issues of me not feeling like I belonged to myself. And ultimately, that culminated in a marriage that was just very abusive. Um, so, yeah, that is where I landed. And I started having a lot of physical symptoms towards the end of that journey. And yeah, that's where I got into like this dance of healing that I never really experienced before.
Yeah.
Yeah, so leading into that, I mean, I've had 4 kids. So,
Mhm.
and in that time, I was very skeptical of the medical system, like just not the medical system. In the beginning, I shouldn't say that. In the beginning, I went to go have a baby, and I met with the doctor who said, I'm one of 17 doctors that might deliver your baby. And I was like, oh, I might never see you again. Like, this is kind of like the most important thing of my life. And she's like, yeah, no, there's just 17 of us, and we're on a team. I was living in Toronto at the time. So then I got a call that was like, we booked you for all your ultrasounds. And I was like, well, what's that ultrasound for? And they're like, oh, to see if the baby has Down syndrome. And I'm like, why would I even care if the baby has, I mean, I care, but why
Mhm.
do I need to be notified? Is there something I can do if they have Down syndrome? And she's like, oh, so you can have an abortion. And I'm like,
Right.
well, wait a minute. I don't even want to have an abortion. What the heck is happening here? And felt really jostled. And I just mentioned it to my mom because I know she had had babies in like a small town. I was like, was it like this with you? And she's like, no, but have you ever thought about midwives? She knew like a family that had babies with midwives. So I went to the midwives in Toronto and I was like, what do you guys do here? And she's like, sits me on a futon, grabs me a tea. She's like, tell me all about yourself. We have an hour. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
this feels a lot fucking better than somebody sitting across a desk from me telling me I can have an abortion for this baby that I'm like super excited about. So that was kind of the first. I mean, my mom was always very into like natural remedies and things like that, but that was the first time on my own that I went and looked for a second opinion, kind of.
Mhm.
So then, shortly after that, came vaccination time. And I was like, I don't think I wasn't even thinking there was anything that bad about it. This is 15 years ago. Like the internet was not what it is now.
Yeah.
And so when I went into the doctor's, I was like, she was set, it was the dose where they get like a bunch.
Right.
Um, and was looking at this like little wee body, and I'm looking at the list of diseases that she's getting, supposed to be able to mount an immune response to. And so I went into the doctor's office and I was just going to say, can she actually like build an immune response to this many things? Right. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, kind of sweaty. And then I was like, I have a question. And he's like, let me guess, autism. And I was like, sorry, what do you mean? What's autism? I had never even heard of it. So then I went
Oh.
home and I Googled vaccines and autism. And you can imagine where that led me. Right. So I was
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, nothing is what I thought it was. And so anyway, those was kind of like that started me on like this journey of like really healthy eating, getting rid of chemicals, like all of the things, right, that we all us crunchy moms do. So then, like I said, I was in this abusive relationship, which was like would be a whole other episode to explain why I stayed in that relationship for 10 years, but it was it was as healthy as I could make it all the time. And same
Yeah.
with my own self. And then I got a letter in the mail. This is probably about 3 years or so before we split up, that said it's time to go and get a pap smear. So it was from the government. And I was like, oh, I guess this is when we go get pap smears. And so I went and got one. And I was like, kind of proud of how well I took care of myself, like exercise, eating well, all those things. Stress through the roof, but I didn't even know what that was about at the time. So anyway, I went in and got my pap done, came home, and they called me like a couple of weeks later and they're like, oh, we want you to come in and discuss your results. And I was like, huh? You only do that if something's wrong. And then I
Yeah.
was like, wait a minute, maybe something's wrong. And it had never occurred to me that it might come back not perfect.
Right.
So I went in to the doctor's office and she was like, you know, you have precancerous cells in your pap smear. And all I heard was the word cancer.
Hmm.
And I went completely limp. And so
Hmm.
all of this, like all of my skepticism, every single thing I had ever learned, and it was like that kind of learning that's like all the way into your gut. Like I knew this is not a reliable, this is not the end of your journey when you're looking for answers about medicine and health. That all went out the window. And I was like, if I die, my kids are going to be left with this man who's not equipped to take care of them. I panicked and that was it. So I said, what do we do? Just tell me what to do and I'll do anything you say. And she's like,
Wow.
oh, yeah, we
I,
do this.
sorry,
Sorry,
it's
go
just
ahead.
interesting, right? Like that's where your mind went, was like, this man is not going to be able to take care of these children,
Hmm.
which just shows even more, like it's just a little, it's revealing, right, on why you would maybe have precancerous cells in the first place. All
Hmm.
that stress of being in a relationship with someone that you already knew deep down was not going to be able to care for your 4 children.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So that was huge. And then also the shame of like not having taken care of that relationship, and being in that position where there wasn't, nobody would even ask and be like, oh, should we see about putting these children elsewhere? It would have just been, and I should say, I did want to say that he's not, he has made improvements since we
Mhm.
have broken up and all of that, but this was in the thick of it. It was pretty dark. So yeah, they said, I said, what do we do with precancerous cells? And she said, we have this little electrified loop. It's called a LEEP procedure. We go in and just scoop them out, and then you go home same day, you'll be fine. So I'm like, okay, well, that sounds great. Let's get that going. And then I had to wait like
Scoop them
three
out.
months. Yeah, it was like a 3 month wait or something. And in that time, I just was getting, like, it was all I could think about was just like, get this out of me, right? And like a real pushing out, like just like I just wanted to get rid of that part of my body and like get
Hmm.
rid of it.
Like a
So then,
repulsion.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I went in and got this procedure done. It was terrible. I mean, like you're laying there with your feet in stirrups and all you smell is burning flesh and things are numb, but your cervix is like on a TV right in front of you as well. And these are people
Yeah.
that do it, they do it every day. That's what her job is.
Right.
So she's not like, how are you doing? Are you okay? Nothing like that. Just like, whoop, whoop, let's get this out and you can be on your merry way. And I'm like having a freaking, like they're burning me in my most
Yeah.
private area, you know? So anyway,
Yeah.
it was pretty traumatic. So I went home and one of the things that came from it was that they said, they gave me this slip as I was leaving that said, you can't have any relations
Hmm.
with your husband for 4 weeks. And it was like a fucking permission slip. It was like a hall pass. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So anyway, that part was great. Went home with my little permission slip
Your hall
and
pass.
my hall pass. And then I you know, went back to my normal life. It was actually not that big of a deal, the procedure outside of the trauma of the actual procedure. The healing part seemed fine. So then a couple of weeks later, I would have got my period and I started having all of my symptoms. I was always regular through all of this stress and everything like that, which is a blessing. But I had, when it came time to get my period, I got all of the leading up symptoms. And then the day came when my period would come and nothing came out. And so I
Hmm.
was like, what the heck? And then I started getting cramping. I was like, okay. And then it was cramping more and more to the point where it felt like early labor. And I was like, this period is stuck. And I knew exactly what had happened, that it had like sealed in some way
Yeah.
and my period was in there. So I called the doctor and I was like, hey, this is what's happening. My period is stuck inside of my uterus right now. And I can feel it pushing it out and it can't get out. And it was the secretary. And she's like, that's never happened before. And I'm like, well, it's
It's
happening right
happening
now.
now.
So, secretary, with all due respect, could you write a note to the doctor and say, this woman needs to see you. So I had to wait overnight and go in. And by the time I got in there, I was just writhing in pain. Like it was like labor. Um,
Wow.
it was, yeah, really intense. So I get in there and then back in the stirrups. And the doctor had this like really long Q-tip, it looked like. And I could see my cervix on the TV. And she goes, poink, poink. she, she said the words poink, poink. And poked it with this Q-tip. And she's like, what do you know? It's sealed. And I was like, well, I knew. I
Yeah.
knew that it was sealed. So
Yeah.
what do we do now? And she's like, well, I've never seen this in my whole life. I've never seen this. Um, but it's probably just, you know, some residual mucus or something like that. And she just severed it. And then everything came out. It was such a relief. And then I went home and whatever. And it was fine. So then a month later, the same thing happened.
No.
And yeah, and it
How do
was
I not know
real.
this story? This is amazing.
Yeah, it was
It's
crazy.
amazing to
It's not
listen
something that you
to.
just bring up at dinner.
No, like, hey, did you know my cervix once sealed?
Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah. And so it was sealed again. I went back in and she's like, no way. And I was like, yeah, it's happening again. And both of us were like, what the heck? And I'm like trying to find information about it on the internet. And, you know, there's people who have like, I don't know what the technical terms is, but like where your cervix does progressively get smaller. But this was
Hmm.
like from trauma, a direct trauma to it. So I was like, what the heck? Anyway, there was no information about it. And so I went in, we did it again, and then I went home. And then the third month it happened again. And I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I can't do this forever. What are the options here? And she's like, you could have a hysterectomy. And I'm like at that point, it feels like I'm going into labor every month and there's not even a baby to show for it. So I was
Yeah.
like, I'll consider it, you know, and then A friend of mine happened to be visiting, and she's a Chinese medicine doctor, and we were just going to go out for a tea. And so she came and picked me up, and she was like, "You look horrendous. Like, you look terrible. What's going on?" And I was like, "Nice to see you." But
Thank you.
also, let's go out for our coffee and we'll talk about it. I hadn't seen her in a long time. So she looked at my tongue, which Chinese medicine doctors do.
Hmm.
And right away, she knew where the problem was. And I was like,
Wow.
yeah. And I was like, okay, here's somebody who I don't even care how it's working. She knows where the problem is from something so uninvasive, just me sticking out my tongue. And I was like, what would you do? Like in my scenario or whatever. And she's like, you need to get acupuncture like right away. And I don't think the acupuncture she didn't know what needed to be fixed, but obviously like the stress in my system was just like through the roof.
Yeah.
So she said, and then so I'm in this relationship where spending money was like a big thing for me. I wasn't allowed to spend any money really. So I was like, I don't know how I can swing this. Like, he's not going to go for me paying for acupuncture for, because it sounds silly and weird,
Right.
like, so I was like, oh gosh. And she's like, you need to call around and see if someone will do a trade. A lot of these people get into this line of work because they want to heal people.
Yeah.
See if you can find someone that will do a trade. So I called every Chinese medicine doctor in town except one. I kept leaving until last because there was no picture of her on her website. And I was like, what are you hiding? Who is this? And it was very suspicious. Anyhow, so no one else would go for the trade. So I ended up calling her and I said, would you ever work on trade? And she said, come in and we'll see. So I went in and told her my story or whatever, what was going on. And she's like, I think I can help. What would you offer in exchange? And I was like, I could make you lunches. I'm just like this. I had a job in like 10 years at this point. And I was, at this point too, I was probably around, like, I'm 5'3". I think I weighed about 200 pounds just from the stress of like, it
Wow.
was really everything was just out of control. So, and I also had, sorry, a rash all over my face that was like oozy. It was bad. I was in bad shape from
Was
the
that the
stress.
rosacea?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was rosacea. It's still, it doesn't come, it's only there in stress. So I'm not sure what it
Yeah.
was, but
Yeah.
it was a bad. And so anyway, looking at me and me offering to make her lunch, she probably was like, I'm not sure you know what you're doing because I looked so terrible. But I swear I was bending over backwards to be healthy with
Healthy.
quotes, right? Like just
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
whatever I can. So anyway, she ended up saying, you can make me a new website. And I was like, and it was the first website that I ever made. It was on a
Wait,
trade with this woman.
hold on.
Mm,
So you didn't know how to make websites?
mm-mm.
And she was
I
like, make
didn't,
me a website.
yeah. She just thought it would be like, like her making her own website, which is what had happened up until then. So,
Right.
you can learn stuff. And
Yeah.
she's like, if you would fiddle around with it and get this thing up and running for me, then we'll do that in exchange for me helping you.
Amazing. Amazing.
I
I didn't know
know,
that was your first website.
my first website. And now I work almost only with healers making their
Yeah.
websites. And
Making their
that's my whole job.
websites.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So beautiful, a beautiful close to that. But anyway, so I went in there and I had acupuncture. And so I was going like 3 times a week, which does not equal one website. I'll just say that. So I was going in there 3 times a week and she just kept saying, it's important that your body remember what it's like to have no stress. So just
Right.
for like, even if it's only for like a minute, at the end of this acupuncture, then that's enough. We're going to remind your body that it can relax. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense or whatever. And then we got up to the point where I was going to get my period. So we like doubled down. I think I was in there every day leading up to my period so that I could just not be stressed. And then I woke up the day that I got my period and I could feel it was stuck again. And she said, come in anyway. So I went in, she gave me acupuncture. And when I was walking home, it came out. And I was like,
Oh God.
yeah. And so I called my doctor and I'm thinking I found the cure for this, right? Like
Yeah.
You just need to get acupuncture, and then you don't have to have some burning flesh and your cervix on a screen and someone pointing you. You can just you do this beautiful experience and it releases your
Yeah.
period. Anyway, so
Amazing.
I called and I was like, okay, I got acupuncture and it released my period. And I had a couple of doctors in the mix at this point, but that doctor was like, well, that just sounds like a really expensive placebo. And I would have been like, if I had was still in my I'll do whatever you tell me mode, I would have heard that as a deterrent. But I think because like just rolling off of this healing that I had experienced, I was like, you're saying a placebo is real and I can heal myself with my brain. And then that's
Is
all I
it?
could hear. Yeah.
It's like the placebo argument is the best
Yeah.
argument.
It's the best.
I love it. I love it because it's like great. It works just it can work just by doing nothing, but just by believing you're taking something amazing. Give that to me. I'll take that any
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. I'll
Yeah.
take like, double down on that.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then, so I continued seeing her, um, for, I think it was a few months, and it wasn't fixing the problem, but it would alleviate the problem in a way that was like, phew. So we're like probably about 6 months in. That website's been done for a long time. And I was like, what do you think I should do to like, I can't just keep coming back for acupuncture. And she's like, that's right. You can't. It's not fixing anything. It's just helping your body to relax in the meantime. And then I was like, okay, so what do I do? And she's like, well, what's happening in the meantime? And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm exercising. And she's like, no, you have to fix your life. And I'm like, she doesn't know
Mm.
anything that's going on at home. She's like, yeah, got to fix your life. And I'm like, okay, should I be vegan? And she's like, no, like fix your life. And I'm like, vitamin C, CoQ10. I'm like guessing all these things. And she's like, no, it's your life. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what the heck you're talking about, but I'll ponder it or whatever. So anyway, it took me a long time to understand what she was talking about. And in the meantime, I ended up booking a hysterectomy because I just was like, I can't deal with this anymore. The stress of that and my relationship and all of that, it was just like, yeah, it was too much. So I
Mhm.
booked a hysterectomy. And then, of course, you have to wait forever to do anything in the medical system. So I had a lot of time to wait. She saw me through all of that, kept
Your
telling me I got to fix my life.
acupuncturist?
Yeah.
Okay.
And she kept telling me, you got to fix your life. And I'm like, yep. So then one day, sorry, and all through this, uh, you know, I'm getting these like permission slips to like not have to be intimate with him. And what had happened is that I had this like list of tools in the beginning that I could use to calm him. So if he was like got really out of control, sometimes I would just have to yell back and it would like snap him out of it. Or sometimes I would be really kind and talk him through it, or I would make a dinner, or those kinds of things would like calm him. But then they all went away and I just had this one tool left. And then
Oh,
when I had this permission slip, it was like being delivered from
yeah.
that very thing. So anyway, one day we had an argument that really summed up. Um, I'd seen it a million times, but we had a cycle of the way that it worked, where something would go wrong, and then he would basically what happened is that like we had an argument, then he went into the bathroom and was getting ready for work, and he was getting worse and worse and more mad in the bathroom. And he is an alcoholic. He was drinking in the bathroom as well. And then I went into the kitchen and I was like making a meal for him and like made the dressing and roasted a chicken breast and like made guacamole and made it as special as I could and put it into this bowl with like homemade dressing and put the lid on. And then so I'm going into one room and being like, fix, 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 fix. And he's going into the
Mhm.
other room, like destroy, 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 destroy.
Yeah.
And then we came out into the hallway and we met and I said, I'm sorry, I made you this dinner. And then he threw it. And I was like, this is how we are. And it happened really in a really short loop. And then I suddenly just knew this is never going to get fixed. You're going to die like this. Like I had a really real vision of myself dying at that level of frequency, like just being so constantly just trying to not get in shit. And
Right.
I couldn't do it anymore. And
Yeah.
so then we left. And then right after that is when my hysterectomy was scheduled. It was already scheduled.
Like you left as in you took the kids
Took the
and you
kids
left.
and
Yeah.
left. Yeah.
You went
And
to your
it's
parents.
never, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, after that, there was a lot of, I mean, that again is like a whole other thing. But I will say that, like, if you're gonna have to go through something like that, homeschooling, oh my God, homeschooling has been the most beautiful blessing in our lives. Um, we were able to go through all of that, and there was a lot, not just like your parents fall out of love and don't want to live together anymore. We had a lot to work through.
Yeah.
We never had to wait. Every moment was the right time to feel. There was
Yeah.
never any like, yeah, we didn't have to do, we closed the gap on healing the hardest parts of that. Like there will always be pieces,
Mm-hmm.
but so beautifully and thoroughly and uh
That's
such a
amazing.
blessing. Yeah.
It's just
So
like,
then,
you want to feel that right now? Go for it. You're home.
yeah,
You're in a safe space.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like if you want to act weird or do something crazy, we know why.
Yeah.
There's no one's going to be stop that or shut that down. None of that happening,
Yeah.
like just
Or this isn't the
everything was
time or
valid.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a huge blessing. In the meantime, there was a million other things to deal with, but yeah.
Wow. And
But
then,
and
yeah, so
so
then you moved out and you moved into your parents' place, and it was like a couple weeks later, you
the
were
hysterectomy
already,
was booked. Yeah.
yeah,
So
that's
I
quick.
went and I had the hysterectomy, and it was like I was really concerned about being put to sleep. I didn't want to be put to sleep. So we made arrangements for that not to happen. And I was just numbed or whatever. So then I was in the room and having my hysterectomy, which is fucking surreal. And it was supposed to be just like it's like a vaginal hysterectomy where there's no incision from the outside. They go
Yeah.
in from the inside and kind
And
of
they were
take it
just,
out that way.
what were they taking out? Your uterus
And my cervix.
and your cervix. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And do they have to then create a new cervix,
Mm-mm.
or they just sew up the vaginal canal at the end?
I
Do you know what
think
they do?
I think that that's what they did.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, there's no cervix. I think I can't remember exactly, but it's healed. It's healed
Yeah.
completely, and
Good.
it's never been healthier in that neck of the woods. Maybe that's the end of this story. I don't know. Anyway, so when I was getting my hysterectomy, I was laying on the table again in the stirrups, and everybody's just like doo doo showing up for work. Like it's such a weird vibe,
Poke,
They're like
poke.
listening to music and what did you guys do for dinner tonight in the background? I'm like, hey, I'm here with like the stirrups and
I
the
am on
anyway.
full display right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
That's so weird.
it was weird. But I
Yeah.
had so when she was doing the hysterectomy, all of a sudden she just said shit. And then I was out. And I was like, I could feel myself like falling into they had to have like the anesthetic on hand in case. And then the in case happened. And I was like, I just went to sleep. And so then I woke up and it felt like a second later. I woke up and I was being wheeled down this hallway, and this nurse is standing over my head, like pushing the bed. And she's like, "Oh, your grays have such a beautiful pattern, like in my hair." And I'm
Oh,
like, what am I, where?
where am I? And who
Good
said, oh shit?
heaven, it sucks here. Yeah. But yeah, so then I got put in this room, and I couldn't really like get my words together. And then later, my doctor came in and she's like, "So, did you hear what happened?" And I'm like, "No, I'm very interested though." And she had cut my bladder while she
Oh,
was
right.
removing my
Oh,
uterus.
shit.
Yeah.
I
So I
forgot
was
about
like,
that.
yeah. that was like, you know, there's nothing you can do except accept it at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
And I was
And it's part of the
just like,
risk of surgical procedures.
I will
It's
say we didn't have
crazy.
any conversations about anything like that before.
Oh, and no
Yeah.
conversations about risks.
No,
Okay.
just, I mean, like I know you can get an infection from having a cut, but even then, like that's me. I don't remember any conversation at all about things that could possibly go wrong.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So now I have a hole in my bladder that has been sutured, but because of that, I had to have a catheter for well, I think it was 15 days altogether,
Wow.
because I couldn't put any pressure on my bladder, and like a Frankenstein freaking hip to hip stapled shut incision that I was not expecting to see.
Oh, because they had to go in externally
Yeah,
to
while
fix
I
the
was out.
bladder.
Yeah. So it was pretty hefty.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, and so then I came home. Sorry, I spent 3 days in the hospital because I also lost a lot of blood and had to have a blood transfusion, which was like, didn't think that was ever going to happen. And then I got home, and we're just moved into my mom's house. Well, I have 4 kids. I don't know if I've said that yet,
Hmm.
but and they were pretty young at the time, and it's just my mom and the kids, and then me, and I'm completely incapacitated. And then we had a flood. I'm like, oh man. Anyway, so if there was a time for me to learn to ask for help, that was it.
Yeah.
And I learned, yeah. So that's all happened. So then,
What
you
year
know,
was that?
that would have been like 2008, no, 2018, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah. And really I feel like at the end of the day, it's just because I fell off. Like at some point along that journey, I went and spoke to a homeopath, and she was like, "Oh, you should have just come here. We can cure precancerous cells." I'm like, "What the
Yeah.
real handy to know, like
Yeah.
it's
There's
not her
actually a
fault. She can't tell me, but like,
no. And I know there's so much information out there about precancerous cells and
yeah.
the
But you know
whole
what?
there's a whole slurry. There's a whole slurry out there.
Yeah. And I think that the real lesson for me was in the going limp. Like when I go limp, I'm pretend I don't know. I could never figure out what to do. I get in like big trouble. And that's always been my MO. Like it's in the times that I've been the most hurt, it's because I've gone limp. And so,
What do you mean gone limp?
like, just been like, I don't know,
Right.
like you drive, you be,
Okay.
yeah.
Like
So,
handing your power over and you're
yeah,
like, you make these decisions. I'm done.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, that it changed a lot for me in a very positive way, I have to say. All of this ended up being positive. So,
Hmm.
in the moment, it was hard, but it became positive. So then I started this business, right? So I was living with my mom, knew that could not go on forever. And so I started this business that was really just, I made a website that said, here's the things I think I could do. And then I put it out there. It was like I would say virtual assistants, right? It said I could make websites because that was my second website that I had made.
Yeah,
And
damn straight it
everybody,
was.
yeah. And everybody that ended up calling me, I would say full, like full truth. Haven't had a job in 10 years or whatever. I don't do this regularly, but I'm willing to learn, and I was only charging like 20, $25 an hour. So it ended up being fine, but I learned through that process and with them saving tons of money. Um, then also me learning live and on the job with like a real audience and real numbers at stake, in the current terrain of the online world, how to make websites really, really well. And
Hmm.
so in that time, I met some really empowering people, through this business. And a lot of it led me into like energetics and understanding all of these, like your thoughts can change literally how your brain works physically, like real. I always felt like that was kind of magic-y. And I was like, I don't know if I should be looking at that. Or I grew up,
Yeah.
in a very traditional Catholic
Yeah.
home. I'm like,
Yeah,
is
we grew up
this
in a
evil?
similar, yeah, in a similar
Yeah.
way where looking at anything that felt at all reminiscent of like woo or new age felt like kind of
Yeah.
betraying everything you grew up with a little bit.
Yeah. And also just like, oh, is the devil hiding in there? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I
Scary.
don't, that's not for me to investigate.
Yeah.
So anyway, it started coming through these healers that I'm working with that it's not as wooey as it seems, right? Like literally, if you wake up and you're like, this is going to be a great day, you have a very different day than if you wake up and you're like, this sucks. Here I go again, another day, like,
Yeah.
so just even the physical feeling in your body from having that thought, I can understand that. I can
Mm-hmm.
understand when my ex-husband walked into the room, everybody got cold. Like that is a real thing. And he didn't do anything. It's just his energy came into the room with him.
Mm-hmm.
Or we would all start yawning whenever he came around. So like just
Interesting.
yeah. So anyway, so through these people, I started to explore kind of like this, you know, more like I would still say let's just like energetics or whatever kind of approach to life. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah. So anyway, I ended up becoming friends with Shane Henderson, who we both know very
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yes.
And she was just getting into practicing Reiki. And she was like, could I practice on you? So I was like, yeah, sure. So I made this appointment to go and see her. And right before that, I had an appointment with my therapist. And she was like, she also does energy work. I never really explored that piece of it with her. I didn't really know much about it. But she was like, we were talking about how I had no memory of like ever being in like a good relationship, like what that would,
Mm.
because she was like, let's imagine what that would feel like. And that's what we were talking about in our therapy session. And I'm like, I can't even draw from anything. I'm not calling to mind a good relationship I've ever been in.
Hmm.
And like, even I'm talking like, even just with friends, like so my recent friends, yes. But prior to that, like just there was always a real power struggle kind of limpness in me. Right. And so
Right.
I was like, I'm not sure if I have that. And she's like, let's do like a scan of your body while we're talking about this and just see what shows up. So I'm like, okay. So just, it was basically just like a meditation that we did together, a body scan. So she's like, we're going to focus on your head, your heart, your throat, blah, blah, blah. I'll go through the body. And then at the end, she was like, it seems like you have a lot of stagnation in your pelvic region, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, that makes sense, whatever. Like she knew my story.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, maybe we should explore that a little bit more. And in my relationship with Chris, I always felt like, I wonder if he's like it felt like he was kind of depositing into me,
Yeah.
just even if it was negativity or darkness of some kind. I don't know, because he got into some pretty crazy stuff towards the end there.
Yeah.
But I was like, I don't know. I'm worried that there is something there. And I had the precancerous cells, and I'm like it became very urgent for me to deal with it.
Yeah.
So, and no, understanding now energy, emotion, all of that kind of stuff as a physical manifestation in the body is like
Yeah.
not weird for me anymore.
Yeah.
And leading up to that, I had seen too my son have a major emotional release. He was very stiff in his pelvis, and someone was able to get him to rotate his pelvis and said, don't be surprised if he has a lot of emotion. And I was like, huh, oh, okay. And he went off the deep end for like 2 weeks and then came right back. And he just
Wow.
had like he was only 3 when all of that happened with his
Yeah.
dad. He couldn't speak any of it. And it was all in it. He was so mad about everything that had happened. And at this point, it was like 3 years ago. So I could see it was very present and it had been stuck. So anyway, then I went and saw Shane, and she did Reiki on me. And she's like, it's all like light and rainbows everywhere except your pelvis. And when she was hovering over my pelvis, my teeth started to rub together. Like I
Mm.
noticed that they were kind of not grinding, but like in the motion of grinding.
Mm-hmm.
And that she also was like, your breathing really picked up when I was, and like, I don't know if you don't know much about Reiki, I know you do, but if anybody
Mm-hmm.
listening doesn't know about Reiki, like there's no touching involved or anything like that. It's just like a hovering of the hands just above the body. So yeah, it was very strange. So when we were finished, she said, I could sense some kind of darkness in the pelvic region or whatever. Have you ever had any trauma there? And I'm like, girl, where, how long do you have? And like those traumas that we've talked about here, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, like having children, having, and then a lot of experiences as in the past of my own were very traumatic, all in
Mm.
the pelvic region. So it was like, where would I even start? You know, I was got
Yeah.
very overwhelmed. So then one day, the next day, I think it was, I was out for a walk and I said, I just had this like awareness, maybe you should talk to your pelvis and see what's up. Right. So
Yeah.
I'm walking and I went to talk to my pelvis and I just had a sense come over me suddenly of like all the different like versions of myself who were there when the trauma happened. And I could
Mm.
feel that memory of me being like, that's someone else's problem. Me turning around, like what I was mentioning about the pushing away of the
Yeah.
cells.
Yeah.
I could see myself um, asking for help and me as the me, the present me turning away and saying like, that's
Interesting.
sorry, that's yours to deal with. Like, sorry that happened, but not my problem. Right. So then I said, I don't know, this is really hard to explain, but anyway, which is
No, I'm
mostly an
following. I love it.
awareness. Yeah.
I
So
talk
then
to
I
my
said,
body very regularly, and
oh,
it's
I do
interesting.
now.
It's really
Yeah.
interesting. You get like these very clear, there's like different voices happening. There's different
Mm-hmm.
images. It's a whole thing, but it's one of my favorite things to do when I've got some alone time and I'm ready to just like open up that box a little bit.
It's been so powerful. This is
Yeah.
the most powerful it was. I'd say, no, not even, but I still do the practice today as well. When
Yeah.
if there's any kind of a tug, any kind of a pain, I'm like, what do you need to tell me? And then the
Hmm.
key is to say, I'll sit with you through it and listen.
Yeah.
And so I
Yes.
said that to these injured versions of my past. And I said, whatever you have to tell me, I'm going to stay until we're done. And I'm not going to leave you to do this by yourself.
Mm,
So
it's
felt like a
beautiful.
weirdo because I was in public and like there was people were walking by. I wasn't like, on a stage or anything, but I was just, it was very, I knew there was an urgency to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then I went home and I got there and my kids had left out this mattress on the floor. They had a sleepover and I kept asking them to put the mattress away and they didn't. So then I went to put the mattress away and there was a box blocking where the mattress would go. So I went and pulled it out and put the mattress away. And the box is this box that like when I was I think 18 or 19, I moved to Whistler and my cousin was like, "Hey, you want to move to Whistler?" And I was like, "Sure." And like 2 days later we were on a plane.
Yeah, of course.
So I had just taken all of my like high school letters, like because we didn't text back then, everything's on a
Yeah.
friggin' letter,
Yeah.
stuffed them into this box and locked it. It had a lock on it. And then I put it away in my cupboard and then I moved. And it was a thing from day one for so long of my life where my mom would be like, "What's in that box? What's in that box? I want it out of my house." And like, in retrospect, if I saw my kid with a locked box and she was gone, I'd be like, "What the heck is in
I'm busting
there?"
into that box.
But I mean, in respect where it's due, she never broke into it.
Amazing.
But it did bother her. And so we would talk about it every time I would come to visit. When are you going to take that box? I moved to Toronto. I moved to London, Ontario. I moved to like all these different places. And every time I came home to visit, she'd be like, "Bring the box." And I'd always forget it. So anyway, there's this box is there. And I'm like, well, where the heck am I going to put this now? Because I had it in like a cubby in my daughter's room.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to go put it back in the cubby, and she had already put her stuff in its place. So I was like, "Shit, okay, well, I guess I
Damn
got
it.
to deal with this." Yeah. So I bring the box upstairs, and as I'm carrying it up the stairs, I'm like, I wonder what's in this. And it had never crossed my mind to look in it. It just was this annoying thing that kept like following me around. So then I brought the box upstairs, and I had lost the key a long time ago. So I had no idea where that was. And I saw nail clippers on my desk. And I was like, I wonder if I just put that file end
Yeah.
into the thing and turned it. I did. And it opened like freaking butter. Like it was made to do
Amazing.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started reading through
Just an
these.
FYI.
Yeah. So started reading through these letters. It was all these letters from high school. And they're all from my boyfriend in high school. And they're just like, oh, you look so beautiful today. Or like, that was so fun when we went to the movies. Or just like these beautiful little, it was like almost like a journal just of the things that we had
Hmm.
done and how much he loved me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that guy. And we
Right.
dated for 3 years. And I'm like,
Oh, God.
what the heck? And so I'm reading these letters, and I'm like, I have been in a beautiful relationship before. Oh my gosh. And it like started coming back to me. And I was like, that was really important, that relationship. And I was just like on cloud nine reading these letters. So there was a lot. So I had to put them away and, do life. And then a few days later, I couldn't sleep. So I got the box out and I read more of it, and or finished all the letters in the box. And it
Mm.
was so good for my self-esteem. Like I forgot
Mm.
how much he loved me.
Yeah.
But then there was one stack of letters in there that was all stapled together, and he had gone he had gone to the Olympics. He was a snowboarder, and he
Oh,
went into the Olympics the first time that it was in the Olympics. And I had totally forgot that had happened. So I'm like, that's weird. Like, you'd think you would remember something like that. Anyway, I'm reading these letters, and they're very real. It was different because all the other things were like, oh, that was so fun at the movies. These were like, oh, I'm on the plane now. It's been 24 hours and it's been sunshine the whole way. Like
yeah.
flying to Japan. He was going to Japan. And then, oh, I had the best day of snowboarding of my life, and like the powder was up to my armpits. So like it was really like all the highs and lows of him. And I
Yeah.
was like, it just started to remind me of this very real person, not just this
Yeah.
like perfect little guy that loved going to the movies so much. Um, and then at the end it said, I wish what did he say? He was facing coming back home. He came in sixth, by the way,
That's
in the world. I
amazing.
know.
That's amazing.
But the last letter was like, he was looking at coming home. It's a 24-hour trip. And he's like, oh, I just don't want to do it. I just want to be at home with you. I want to
Mm.
hug you and feel you on my, like in the spot, like the shoulder that was my spot or whatever, and feel your warmth. And
Mm.
in that sentence, I was there. Like I could
Yeah.
feel him. I could smell his hoodie. And I was like, wait a minute, something is really wrong here that you forgot all of this. And then I went right into grief as if we had broken up that day. So I was like
Wow.
43, I guess, at this point, having a 18-year-old breakup. And I was like, what the And I knew enough, seeing Noah, my
Yeah.
son, release that trauma, that there is old trauma that can come out.
Yeah.
And same with like all of this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I knew it was from me saying to my pelvis, it's okay, I won't turn away. And it
Mm.
was related to that. So I'm like, I am crying nonstop for like 2 weeks. Like just walking down the street, I would start crying, doing the dishes, I'm crying. Like, when you break up in high school, it's so hard.
It's so hard. It's
Yeah.
so hard.
And I was doing that. So I, okay, what do I want to say here? It just, I can't remember what
Let's
I was going to say next.
It's really fresh, and you're processing it all again
Yeah.
in your 40s, which shows that there was something that was like blocked
Yeah.
back then, and that you
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say.
compartmentalized it.
Yeah. So then I had this memory of like when I lived in Whistler, he also lived in Whistler, and I ran
Oh,
into him in a bar. There's so many weird things that happen there. But anyway, I was like, I realized like after we broke up, he because I didn't even think about it up until that point. But we broke up, and then there was a thing with his friend. One of his friends kissed me, and
mm.
I was like, and then he told him that we had kissed, and then he got really upset about it, and I was like, I like I
I
didn't
didn't do
do anything.
anything.
Yeah. And then my best friend at the time moved with him out to Whistler. And so it was like, wow, like my whole life fell apart. And when we broke up, I was just blindsided. Like I remember it was like I could just feel my whole future just like crumbling away. And I'm like, well,
No.
who even am I? So it was
Yeah.
like these back to back really hard things happened. And then all of a sudden I was just fine. And I'm like, oh, that's fine. And it's to the point where when my cousin says, hey, you want to move out there to be around those two people that like just like totally stabbed you in the back, you're like, yeah, sure. That sounds fine. And I
Without a
had
second thought.
yeah. And then so when I first started to remember this relationship I went through, I thought about messaging him and being like telling him. And when I went into my messages, there was messages from him. Like, hey, or like just like liking my stories or stuff like that. I went through all my posts and he had liked all the posts on my Instagram and in Facebook and stuff like that.
Ah,
And I'm like, he's been around all this time and I totally forgot. I
that
knew
he
we
even
dated.
existed.
Yeah, but he had no significance in my life. It
Yeah.
was so weird. So anyway, I remembered that I'd met him in Whistler one time in a bar, and he was like, "Oh, Laura, I'm so sorry about what happened." And I was like, didn't get what he was talking about. I was like, I had totally forgotten it completely, the emotional piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm like, it's fine, don't worry about it or whatever. And he's like, no, I'm like really sorry. And I'm like, it's fine. Like, don't worry about it. Just I'm trying to have fun, like could you
Yeah.
please go over
Yeah.
there? And then it kind of got like it kept kind of going on. And then I had a new boyfriend at the time and he came over and he's like, is this guy bugging you or whatever? And I'm like, oh gosh, like this is such a mess. I'm like, just go away, okay? Like go away. It's not that big of a deal. And he was really upset. And I was like, he's looking at me and saying, I'm sorry for something pretty hefty and really off brand for him.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And not trying to be mean about it. I
No,
just
but
really didn't know. Yeah.
you had already locked it up tight,
Yeah.
which is your 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 coping mechanism,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So then I realized that like what had happened is that prior to high school, I had like a lot of traumas, like I was mentioning before. They were too much for me to deal with and they were very shameful and I had nowhere I felt I could bring it. And
Mm-hmm.
so then right after that, right when I did that thing where I was like, whew, thank God that's over, inbounds this guy full of fucking sunshine, like the most beautiful human being, just comes in and he's like, just let me love the crap out of you.
And
And
that's the
that
guy.
literally, that's the guy.
Okay.
And that literally just brought me to like a stabilized baseline. I,
Mm.
and he held me there. And then when we broke up, in retrospect, I'm like, that guy needed to let go of me. I was a dead weight. Had
Mm.
so much pain that like he couldn't fly and he was obviously meant to. Well, he was still holding on to me. But anyway, so when we did break up, I think having those two bookends at the beginning of high school and the end of high school, I just forgot high school. And it was all in that friggin' box that showed up
Wow.
the minute I said to my pelvis, you can show me and I won't turn away.
Oof.
I know. And so then I ended up messaging him and saying, sorry, I'm sorry about what happened at that bar. I explained, a little bit about what had happened. And We ended up having a coffee together
No way.
recently. Yeah, it was really so neat and such a beautiful way to close it. Like, so weird though, because I hadn't thought of him, hadn't been following along or anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I did. So he had a kid at some point, and I was like, "Oh, your kid's cute." You know, I would say things like that, but it was like me saying it to just anybody I knew and
Anybody.
all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah, I didn't really. It's like he disappeared for like almost 30 years, and then he shows up, and he's just got this different voice, like a man voice, and then everything else was the same. So.
Yeah.
Oh man, it was just pretty nutty. And yeah, that then is where all of that whole big thing has now distilled down into a very usable approach to healing that I use every single day for the rest of my
Wow.
life, which is
Every single
basically
day,
just, yeah,
you're checking in with your
don't,
body.
yeah. And some of the
Yeah.
stuff that it's revealed, it's just like you would never expect. You don't know what you forget or what was too much when you were a kid. You can't know.
Do you know, I
Because
heard this, I can't remember where, I think it was in a podcast, but I was listening to this woman, I think she was like a kinesiologist or something. But she said that what she does is when she makes a decision about something or she decides to forgive somebody or let something go, she she checks in with her body because she said sometimes emotionally we can understand something, but our body doesn't know we've already processed it. So she
mm,
said she imagines this little man
uh-huh,
running and she like imagines him running through her head and through her ears and like, did you know we forgave that person? And did you know? And she's like, she'll imagine him going down her arm and all of a sudden she'll imagine him like at her elbow and the elbow is like, wait a minute, what?
right.
Wait, we forgave him? What the fuck are you talking about? And then she's
Hmm.
like, oh, okay, we need to go back to here later. And so then she goes to the whole body and notes any spots where there was resistance. And then she
Hmm.
goes back later and she'll hold her elbow and say, yeah, we forgave him. But I
Hmm.
want you to tell me what you're feeling right now. And the elbow will say, like, well, I'm still really hurt and I'm angry. And then
Right.
she just holds it and she said, like, that sounds like that's really hard. And I'm so
Hmm.
sorry you're hurt and angry. And not correcting it, not saying you don't need to do that anymore or anything, just sitting there and holding it and saying, like, I'll be here with you while you're
Hmm.
feeling that, and just being there and sitting with it and it starts to ease. And so I heard that story. And then I have a friend locally who got a vaccination in the last few years, and she felt pressured to take this. So she didn't really want it, but she got it, and she had a really sore arm afterwards. And she's grown up with a lot of physical challenges, so she had
Hmm.
learned to talk to her body from a young age. And so she was holding her arm, and she was like, "What is going on? Like, what do you need to tell me?" And the arm was like, you should not have gotten this. This would be really bad for you, especially with all of your like all the health issues you already have. But I'm going to hold it for you. I'm going to hold it for you in your arm, and I'm not going to let it go through the rest of your body the best I can, which means your arm's going to hurt for a while. We're going to have some inflammation, but I'm going to do my best to hold this here because inflammation in your arm is going to be better than elsewhere in your body where you've already experienced pain and injury. And she
Hmm.
was like, oh, okay. And she's like, is there anything I can do? And the arm's like, drink a lot of water and I need you to rest and I need you to do
Hmm.
these things. She's like, okay, all right. So she
Oh,
went and
that's beautiful.
yeah, and this is not someone who I would have expected upon seeing her or having even a few conversations with her to have that kind of relationship with her body. But it was
Hmm.
so great. And now hearing you do the same thing, like I love that. It's such an easy and accessible tool. And I know it probably feels awkward the first time you do it.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe I'm sure that some people, when they do it the first time, they don't hear anything back. But
Hmm.
the first time I did it, it was like, oh, hello, finally. Oh,
Yes.
you're listening to me?
Yeah.
Wait, here's my microphone. I have so much to tell you.
Yeah. And I think too, even I still do sometimes now. I'm like, I'll say, like, liver, do you have something to tell me?
Yeah.
And then and it will come out and I can hear the words, but I'm like, is that the liver or is that my brain?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that me making it up or am I, and it's like, what do you have to lose by listening?
What do you
Like
have to lose?
nothing.
It's the
Yeah.
same thing with muscle testing, right? Like you can really like I do a lot of muscle testing on myself and on other people, but when you're doing it on yourself, you can really second guess it.
Hmm.
So for me, I found a couple methods where it's a lot harder for me to second guess. Like it's a lot easier for me to trust the
Hmm.
process when I do it in specific ways.
Yeah.
Like the sway test when you're standing. Have you ever done a
Hmm.
muscle test?
I have. It's been like I was a kid. I should do that now though.
Yeah, it's really fun. So the one that I find the easiest for people to kind of wrap their minds around, and well, for me, it was the easiest to access, is like you just stand with your feet shoulder width apart, and then
Hmm.
you hold a thought, like a question, a yes or no question in your mind, or you can hold an item like a tincture or something to your chest, and you close
Hmm.
your eyes and you notice, and it can take just a split second or it can take a minute, but you'll notice a pull forwards, which is a yes, or a lean backwards, which is a no. And
Oh,
you can
that's so
actually,
interesting.
and after practicing it so much now, I just pull something to my chest and immediately my body is like lurching forward, or
Right.
it's like boom, like it's a big sway now that I've
Hmm.
been doing it a lot.
Yeah, I would say that too. It's like a muscle. Like you get it becomes more the communication becomes a little more greased every time.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Those neural pathways.
Hmm.
So interesting. And I don't know, did you ever get into like the work of Louise Hay?
Hmm. Oh
Because
yeah.
her
Some of
origin,
them sometimes I'm like, okay, forget it. Just go on.
yeah, but like her origin story, right?
Hmm.
She had vaginal cancer
Right.
and she was told by the doctor, you need to go do all these conventional treatments. And she didn't like the sound of it. And she knew as soon as she got that diagnosis, she knew intuitively exactly what it was from. And it was from trauma in that region.
Hmm.
And we in German New Medicine, we know that the vaginal canal and cervix have a lot to do with your territory being crossed,
Mm.
right? Your boundaries being crossed. It could be your physical territory, like your body or your home, or it could be like your close relationships where that's been threatened, right? And
Hmm.
you're feeling unstable or you're feeling penetrated,
Right.
And so for Louise Hay, she went the totally alternative route and I think she did Reiki and lots of nutrition. She did enemas and she ended up healing her vaginal cancer without any conventional treatment. And I love that. And that was the start for her. That
Hmm.
was the beginning for her. And it opened the whole door. And then she wrote that great book, Heal Your Body, where she's
Yeah.
mapped. So for anyone interested, it's a tiny little book. I can probably link it in the show notes, but it's got page after page. It links like every organ system in the body and every region of the body with a possible emotional link to like what's held in that space. And then
Hmm.
it also has a mantra to
Yeah.
help you move through it, which I love. Like it's not only a map of where things are held in the body, but it's also a little toolkit
Hmm.
how to move forward.
Yeah. I'd say that book comes on and off the bookshelf more than any other book
Yeah.
in our house. That's pretty cool. But it's so interesting that you say that too, because I think when we opened this conversation, I said that the real thing that healed in me was that I couldn't separate where I start and other people begin or whatever, like I didn't feel
Yeah.
like I belonged to
You did.
myself. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so
So
for that,
establishing your boundaries within that. And
mhm,
maybe even just finding that old box of letters too, it reestablished you as your value, right? Reestablished the value in you that other people could see, that he could see,
mhm,
which
yeah.
kind of brings your power back. Like, wait a minute, no, I deserve to be here and I deserve to own this space that is my body.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
since then, you're in
Thanks
a
for I
beautiful
went back.
home.
So a year later, I went back to Reiki and
Hmm.
we did the scan. And she was like, she just high-fived me and she's like, you did it, girl.
Shane?
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
all clear, all good, no darkness, nothing left in that space. And I noticed also my scar got a lot softer, a lot softer.
Wow.
Yeah, just really,
Wow.
it used to like tug even on parts of my, like my belly or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, so just lots of healing. And then the people that I work with now, like that's all that that's what they talk about nonstop. And um, it's so real. It's
Yeah.
so real. So anyway,
That's amazing too that you're now working in the space of alternative medicine.
yeah,
Like that's the space you're working in, but you're doing the websites for them. But you're
yeah,
learning about all these different modalities.
yeah.
And it's about the energy you're surrounded with. So you are surrounded with your ex's energy,
Mhm.
right? Which is like dragging you down in a certain way and affecting you on a vibrational level. And now the people that you're surrounded with.
Yeah. It took me a long time to feel okay about being fitting in or whatever, like not dragging them down.
Oh,
These people are
interesting.
insanely high vibrational. And then also like teaching other people how to raise their vibrations. It's so
Mm,
insane. And actually, I was at a retreat and it kind of dropped in that like these people can't do their work without me. Like they can't reach people without
yeah.
coming through the work that I do. And
Yeah.
that was like, you're doing it. I felt like I made it in that moment, just that like I don't feel any kind of outside of my own kids, I don't feel any call to be a healer,
Yeah.
but I am definitely the right hand of many healers.
Yeah.
Getting them to events, getting them to into the office, getting explaining this ridiculous sounding thought that has existed in their head forever and getting it onto a piece of paper for someone to read or a website for people to read and
Yeah.
understand and take in. Yeah, it's
I
so
love that.
rewarding.
You
Oh,
are
so
the right
rewarding.
hand of all these healers. I love that.
So yeah, good
Oh
times.
my God. So if you could go back, this is kind of my closing question, I guess.
Mhm.
If you could go back to that version of yourself who was, kind of trapped in a volatile relationship and experiencing all these issues like with your cervix and the yeah, and it healing over like that. Oh my goodness. If you could go back and you could whisper in her ear almost as like an older sister, what would you say to her as words of comfort?
I would probably say like you're learning right now
Mm,
a lesson that will sit so deep within you that you can't help but share it later. And
mm,
it's really gonna change things. I feel like it kind of almost booted me out of even like my family of origin in the way that I understand the body, the
right.
soul, and definitely energy. Yeah, I wouldn't change any part of it at all from day one because it was so revealing, and I feel like I needed it. I had the capacity to learn the lesson.
Yeah,
So, mhm.
that's amazing.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. I'm sure, even with like that whole thing with your cervix closing over, I've never heard of that, but guaranteed there's people out there who have had that too, who
and
are,
I did left this out too, that it
yeah,
wasn't necessarily, there probably was like a little membrane. Like if you think about how long it takes for skin to grow
yeah.
over, there could have been a membrane. But because the acupuncture is what released it, it was constriction. Would have been
Oh,
the
right.
constriction, right? Like, so holding things out, keeping things from going in, like literally clamping down and saying, if you're not going to do this, I will. So,
Oh, and it
right.
also feels like so parallel to how you're holding in so many other things and not letting them
Mhm.
process out.
And how fucking beautiful is
Such a
that your
mirror.
body will
Yeah.
take over. Your
Yeah.
body will take over and do like what you said about that, keeping the damage in the arm. Like
Yeah.
your body has your back so much. And like my whole life, I just hated my body. Always
Mm,
hated my body. Like, why can't you just be this? Why can't you just be that? She's like, because I'm fucking busy making up for all your dumb mistakes. Like, so I'd say that's been the biggest gift of my 40s, is finally partnering with my body and saying, like, holy cow, you're a work of art.
Right? That's amazing. That was my conversation with Lora Groves, whom I love dearly. She is a wonderful friend. We met through the homeschooling community locally, and I've known her for several years. And there are several things in this conversation that I did not know about her health journey. So it was really great to kind of dig deep and hear her whole story, because it's so complex. I think when I met her, or when we began our friendship, it was just after all of this had really taken place, like the bulk of this had taken place. So yeah, it was really interesting. And I feel really, really honored that she shared this with me. Now, I did want to touch on what you can possibly do if you are someone who has experienced an abnormal pap smear. If you're feeling overwhelmed or scared, I just want to say that over 90% of HPV infections, which are often what lead to abnormal pap smears, over 90% of them will clear on their own in 2 years, according to the WHO, which is amazing and something that we need to be told more often, because I think when we hear abnormal cells, we immediately jump to cancer, and that's such a huge and scary word. And again, that can kind of double down on these cervical scares and the German New Medicine energy around it, where we think about territorial conflict. So suddenly you also have had a pap smear, which feels very much like a territorial conflict. Your body is being invaded. And then also we're getting these results that are scary, and we feel our body is being invaded by this news, really, that can be really shocking and can feel invasive. Now, what can you do then if you get not a diagnosis, I guess it's more just like, hey, here we have some abnormal cells. We don't know what's going to happen. So there's a wonderful website called flowliving.com, where Alyssa Vida of Flow Living, she's written a whole article on this, and it's not super in-depth, but it does give you lots of information, and there's lots of links listed there. So I'll put that link below. Some of the things she recommends are vitamin C, which can be really protective and immune boosting for cervical health. Zinc, which is considered like a zinc deficiency is considered a risk for cervical issues. Folic acid. Multiple studies have linked low levels of folic acid to higher incidence of cervical dysplasia. You can also combine it, she says, with B12 for increased protection against cervical cell changes. So B12 and folic acid, these are the two that I've actually come across in conversation with my friend Nikki, who is a fertility awareness method practitioner based in Ottawa, Ontario, just south of Collingwood. She does amazing one-on-ones helping to support women in person or online to navigate or in navigating their menstrual cycle and their hormones, and how to support things such as PCOS and other really kind of specific conditions that women experience with their cervix and their hormones and their menstrual cycle. So she's a great resource to reach out to if you want that one-on-one support. I'll put Nikki's information below as well. One of the other things that Alyssa mentions here is beta carotene. So women with high levels of beta carotene were up to 50% less likely to acquire HPV-related infections than those with low levels. Another one is selenium. A recent study, supplementation with selenium improved the cervical health of over 75% of women over a period of 6 months. And then she mentions a final one, DIM, which I can't pronounce the full word of it, indolylmethan, also known as DIM, has been shown to have positive effect on HPV and can potentially halt the spread of cervical cancer. Now, of course, we do also have the HPV vaccine. which is an option, but it is also wise to consider that the HPV vaccine only protects against about 10% of cervical cancers because there are so many types. And before the latest vaccine, before COVID vaccine, the HPV vaccine had more reports of side effects than any other vaccine in history, according to VAERS, which is the Vaccine Injury Reporting website that is run by both the CDC and the FDA. And according to a study done by Harvard, the vaccine injuries reported to VAERS were less than 5% of the actual injuries that occurred. So in order to go through that VAERS application process and to fill out all that information, it can be daunting. A lot of people don't really know how to do it. Doctors are actually supposed to be doing this on behalf of patients, but it's not mandated, and so it just doesn't get done as often as it's supposed to be. So it already had the highest reporting for side effects, and then on top of that, we know that the reporting is less than 5%. So that's really interesting, and it's something just to take into consideration when you're making a choice about a vaccine like that, especially when administered to young girls and now boys. And some of those side effects can be quite devastating. But there is a great book if you're interested in diving into that at all. It's called The HPV Vaccine on Trial. It's by Mary Holland, Kim Mack Rosenberg, and Eileen Loriot. And it follows the shocking story chronicling what they say global efforts to sell and compel this alleged miracle. It talks about clinical data, clinical trial data, government approvals, advertising, personal accounts of egregious injuries, and in countries all around the world. And it's written in plain language and it's really easy to read. And it's really fascinating, especially if this is something you want to dig into, whether you've gotten the vaccine already or not. It's just, I feel like information is power, and it's something that we need to prioritize more, not in this I can do my own research as in I'm going to run my own studies, but as in I'm capable of reading books and reading studies, and I could read books and acknowledge that there's going to be bias in every book that's written, and read things on both sides and educate yourself on both sides of arguments before you make a choice, especially when it's a heavy choice like this, when you're bringing something into your body that is foreign and man-made. So if you have had a recent pap smear or you are about to have a pap smear, just be aware, one, it's wise to talk to our bodies and let our bodies know what's about to happen. So even putting your hands over your womb and saying, hey, we're about to go into this procedure. It's okay for this to happen. We're welcoming this. This pap smear is part of my health plan, and it is in an effort to protect me. So going in with that idea, so your cervix is already aware that this is happening. And I know this sounds maybe hokey to some of you, but again, if you think about how much our bodies communicate, just from Lora's stories, my own stories, we know that the body is not always in line with our thoughts. Our body doesn't always know what's happening. So it only takes a moment just to do that in the car just before you get into the doctor's office. And then the other thing, if you get a call back, let's not get too scared, right? And to just bring in this information, sit with it, ask our bodies what it wants to do, and see if there's anywhere we can reach out to any kind of healthcare practitioner, someone like Nikki Zavitz of Pretty River Red Tent, who can maybe help. Let's say, let's give 6 months and try these natural methods before doing something extreme like the LEEP procedure, which can be what Lora had, and it can have some pretty extreme results. I also had a friend who had done a freezing one as well, and it was very uncomfortable. She really didn't enjoy it. And again, it's not that all medicine has to be comfortable, but it's wise to have a full understanding of all of our options before we make any choices. I advocate for empowerment through knowledge and understanding, or what we can call informed consent. So if we know all the potential side effects or downsides or risks of any procedure supplement medicine, and we understand the potential benefits. And then we can weigh those out ourselves, maybe with a trusted healthcare practitioner or with your family, or even just within your body, and using that intuition muscle. And of course, I do need to say here that anything we discuss on this podcast and any ideas I might give or anecdotes I might share are not a replacement for your own medical care and the opinion of your own medical doctor. So please take everything we discuss here with a grain of salt. These are our personal opinions and personal journeys, and everybody and every body is unique. So thank you for joining me today. I'd love to go into herbs as well for reproductive health, but we'll do that another time. This was a great episode, and I'm really glad that you have stuck around and you've listened to the whole thing. So if you're at the end, thank you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for supporting this podcast. It means so much to me. And if you want to reach out or you want to see what else I'm doing, you could head over to Bloom Botanicals, BLOEM, botanicals.ca, which is the Dutch word for flower, by the way. And here we make all kinds of herbal products, from whole plant infused body oils to fresh plant tinctures, salves, ointments, some teas, lots of digest bitters, and a lot of fun things. We also run workshops here on our property in Kimberley, Ontario. It's really cute. It's just it's just south of Georgian Bay, if you know the area at all. And of course, we do one-on-one consultations where we really focus on German new medicine and herbs and neurolinguistic programming, and kind of bring it all together in this mishmash of body, spirit, and mind, which I love doing, and I have a hard time describing even what it is. But yeah, if you have questions, reach out, and thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful day.